各位觀眾大家好，歡迎收睇26分鐘見證實錄之與黨領對話。第45屆聯邦大選將會喺4月28號舉行。我哋就一連兩集嘅節目裏面，分別邀請到聯邦幾個主要政黨嘅黨領進行專訪。咁喺今集嘅第一部分，首先我哋就會去了解聯邦新民主黨黨領將搣星早面成對於本國目前面臨一系列問題嘅睇法。Mr. Singh 你好，首先好多謝你接受我哋今次嘅專訪啊。
My pleasure, honored to be here.
咁首先想問下你啦，從目前嘅民意調查結果睇嚟啊，新民主黨嘅支持率咧唔係太理想。你計劃咧會點樣喺選舉日之前啊重建選民嘅信心，並且扭轉呢一個形勢啊？
Well, first off, we just had an election very recently in Ontario, and the polls had Ontario NDP losing party status, but we formed official opposition. So I don't put too much weight in the polls, but I know this is an important election, and we want Canadians to think about who is going to fight for you in all the uncertainty of Donald Trump. Who's going to say we have to protect families, we have to protect healthcare, we have to protect people, not the very powerful businesses. That's New Democrats. We're in it for everyday people, small business, working people, middle class. That's who we are.
你曾經提到啊，即使新民主黨喺全國範圍內呢係面臨挑戰啊，但係你對於你自己喺本拿比中選區嘅勝算呢係絕對有信心㗎。咁究竟係乜嘢具體嘅原因俾到你咁大信心啊？
We have a long tradition of having New Democrats represent Burnaby. All levels of government, provincial and municipal, have lots of NDP support. But most importantly, because people in Burnaby and many people across BC know New Democrats are the ones that fought for dental care and pharmacare and made the government do it. And now people are starting to get more worried that Mark Carney might cut the things they need. And so you need New Democrats to fight for you.
咁你會點樣調整方式啊嚟到同呢一個新劃分嘅選區嘅選民互動呢？
Well, so I'm speaking to people. My team is going out and connecting with the new residents. There's new parts of the riding that we didn't represent before, so they're speaking with them. And I'm letting people know across the country. In this time, when people might be worried that healthcare gets cut, or people might be worried that their pensions or the things that people need might get cut, who's going to stand up and say no to those cuts? That's New Democrats. We have shown that we fight for healthcare, we fight for working people, we fight for the middle class. And so I would say if you want someone that's going to stand up for you in all of the worrying times with Donald Trump, send a New Democrat to Ottawa.
呢個住屋政策方面承諾到啊，要喺2030年呢建造300萬個房屋單位嘅，包括可負擔房屋啦。但係喺勞動力短缺同埋建築成本不斷上升嘅情況底下，你將會點樣確保啊能夠實現到呢一個咁高嘅目標啊？
On the construction costs, we have allocated funding for the buildings that need to be made. They need infrastructure, so they need the plumbing, the water connection, the infrastructure around the buildings that the cities often make. We're going to create a fund to build those things and make it easier for buildings to come up if we can build the water and the sewage and the other infrastructure ahead of time and invest enough money so that we can help municipalities build those things. The other thing is the housing accelerator has shown it works. It builds more homes. We're going to double that amount. So we hope that it'll create double the amount of homes being built. And then the final thing, to make it affordable, we are requiring that anything that we build, if a province or a municipality wants federal money to build new homes, they have to meet certain conditions. And one of that is rent control. The other condition is they can't rent evict somebody who lives in a building. We want these rules in place to protect people and keep the homes affordable. So we're not building a building and then all of a sudden it becomes no longer affordable. So that's why we've put conditions in place.
你提到要全面禁止外國買家進入本國嘅樓市，以壓抑投機行為啊。但係咧，有人就擔心到呢一個政策可能會對經濟增長或者係外國投資產生難以預計嘅後果。你點樣回應呢？
Well, we of course will invite people to invest in Canada in other areas, but if we build a home here, it should be for the people that have chosen to make Canada home. So new Canadians that have come here, people that are born here, our kids. If buildings are being made and homes are being built, I want those to go to people who are actually living in this country, who actually choose to live here. Instead of big investors from different countries that are just buying up the homes and not living there, they're increasing the prices, making it harder for people to afford it. I want the homes here for people who live here. If someone chooses to come to this beautiful country, amazing. They should be able to have a home. If someone's just using our housing market like a stock market, I don't want that to happen.
特朗普嘅關稅政策嚴重影響到加拿大嘅產業啦。新民主黨政府將會採取邊一啲嘅具體措施嚟到保障加拿大工人同埋企業啊？
One of the first things that we would do, and what we said should happen right away, is for workers that might lose their jobs and those who have already lost their jobs, the EI, employment insurance, is not good enough to cover the bills. It only covers half of your salary, and it limits at $60,000 income. So if someone's earning maybe 70 or 80,000, then they're only really getting a third of their income by employment insurance. And I don't think many people can actually afford to pay their bills, their rent, their mortgage on a third of their income or even half of their income. People are spending their whole salary on their living expenses. They don't have much left over to save. So we want EI to be higher to protect those workers. So if you do lose your job, you're not going to lose your home. That's one. Secondly, we have a plan to build Canadian, buy Canadian, and use Canadian workers. So anyone that's in our country should be getting the jobs, and we should create opportunities in our country. And for a long time, when we buy things at the federal level, we don't really specify if it has to be built in Canada. We want a new rule that anytime we spend money federally, it should go towards Canadian businesses that have Canadian workers making the products in Canada. We also use Canadian lumber, Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum in the things that we build. Roads, bridges, homes, we need lots of homes. And public infrastructure, we should use only Canadian products.
咁講到工人權益方面啦，你會採取邊一啲嘅具體措施嚟到加強勞工保障，咁確保加拿大工人獲得公平嘅工資呢？
Well, one of the examples of what we passed was the anti-scab legislation that stops the big bosses from replacing a worker if they're on strike with somebody else. And so we put in that law. We would look for ways to strengthen the labor code because we really believe our country is only as strong as the people working in the country. And so we want to protect them with stronger labor codes. And we also know that when people can join a union, it's a good way for them to be able to get better wages. We think that's really important. For us, we were created by workers. They founded our party. The labor movement and farmers made the NDP. So we'll always look for ways to make sure those are the people, everyday working families, are the ones that we prioritize.
唔喺目前嘅加美貿易戰、加中關係緊張同埋加印關係一度緊張嘅背景之下，你認為加拿大應該點樣處理同美國、中國同印度等國家嘅關係呢？
The U.S. picked a war with us, a trade war with us that was unprovoked, illegal, and wrong, unjustified. We have to fight back. There are things that we should work out. There are some tariff situations with China, and I want us to negotiate to get to a better place. And so I think that showing the unreliability of the United States has shown us that we need to look to other trading partners. But all of this shows us that we need to actually have more of an independence in our country. We need to build more of the things that we need in our own country. During the pandemic, we saw we weren't making some of the things we needed, like PPE, like the protective equipment, and we were really at the mercy of the world, and we had to buy from other places instead of making it ourselves. So we need to make more of what we need in our own country. I think that's a big part of it. And then we need to negotiate with more nations when we trade. We can't be so reliant on just one or two countries. We have to have a variety of countries we trade with and build stronger relationships with them.
作為新民主黨嘅黨領你長時間以嚟咧都支持更加開放同包容嘅移民政策㗎。咁你可唔可以詳細解釋一下新民主黨嘅移民政策點樣能夠平衡到勞動市場需求同埋人道考量啊？
We believe we need immigration. Our country is based on immigration, and so that'll always be the case. The way we set the immigration numbers should be set by the experts. So we were hoping we would set an expert panel that looks at our labor needs, like you mentioned, our ability to welcome new Canadians. So we want people to come here, but also we want them to be able to live a good life. So we look at our labor needs, our capacity, and then we set a number that meets our needs.
咁你承諾話要到2030年咧，所有加拿大人咧都要能夠有家庭醫生嘅服務。但係咧，你將會點樣解決呢一項牽涉到100億元成本嘅計劃咧？
So I think it's very good for our healthcare system, good for the person to have healthcare in a way that prevents the illness. So I believe in it. The way we achieve it, a couple of things we want to do. One is there's tens of thousands of workers, specifically physicians, that have trained internationally, whether they were born in Canada or came from somewhere else. They're now in Canada and they're Canadians. They have the training, they have the experience. Many of them have already passed the exams, but they can't finish the last step, which is getting a residency position. as a physician, you need to spend some time underneath another doctor before you become fully licensed. We are proposing to open up thousands of new spots for residencies so these internationally trained people can actually practice here in Canada. They can care for people here in Canada.
你一直都提倡要擴大公共醫療保障，尤其係喺牙科同埋藥物保健方面啊。咁如果大選之後，你會點樣確保呢一啲嘅計劃喺財政上持續得到支持並且係實施啊？
So we would fight for it. I think it's a really important question. For anyone who wants medication coverage to get broader, you have to vote for New Democrats. The Liberals would never have done this, and we forced them to do it. They promised this 30 years ago and didn't do anything until the last couple of years where we actually made them do it. So if you want pharmacare coverage, which means everyone in our country will have free medication, we think it's the right thing to do. And every other country in the world where they have universal medication, they include, or they have universal healthcare, they include the medication as well. We're the only country that doesn't include it because everyone figured out if you go to a doctor, they say, take this medication, but you can't afford it, the system doesn't work. So people need to be able to afford it. So we'll fight for that. I've said today, the first next step that we would take in pharmacare is essential medicine. And essential medicine is a list of medications that are most prescribed, most used. We would cover that within the next first year. Mark Carney has said he would stop pharmacare, not expand it anymore. And Pierre Poilievre thinks it's a bad idea and he wants to get rid of it. So if you want to expand it, we're the ones to do it.
如果今次嘅大選結果係冇黨派能夠組成多數政府啊，咁聯邦新民主黨係咪願意同自由黨或者其他黨派再次合作呢？你認為啊，合作嘅關鍵條件係乜嘢啊？
Right. Well, one thing we've ruled out, we said New Democrats will never make Pierre Poilievre, the Conservatives, the Prime Minister. We'll never do that. And we're prepared to use our power to fight for the things that Canadians need. And so we'd fight for pharmacare. We'd fight to protect our healthcare against cuts. We would fight to protect workers. So these are our priorities, and we're laying out the things we want to do. Banning big corporations from buying up affordable homes, making the foreign ownership ban permanent so that we keep Canadian homes for people who live here. We have lots of plans, and we would fight to make sure that these things happen in the next government.
Mr. Singh， 再次多謝你接受我哋今次嘅專訪。
Thank you. My pleasure.
了解過聯邦新民主黨黨領駔勉誠對於各競選議題嘅立場之後啊，下一節我哋將去訪問聯邦綠黨共同黨領 Elizabeth May 美意，聽聽佢對今次大選嘅政綱方向。歡迎返嚟26分鐘見證實錄之與黨領對話。聯邦綠黨共同黨領 Elizabeth May 美意強調啊，加拿大正面對氣候變化帶嚟嘅重要挑戰，並且呼籲國民要視呢一個問題為今屆大選嘅考慮因素。究竟綠黨喺今次選舉之中能否說服更多嘅選民去支持佢哋嘅環保同埋氣候政策呢？佢哋又會點樣喺選舉之中突圍呢？ Miss May 你好，好多謝你接受我哋今次嘅專訪啊。
Well, thank you for having me.
你點樣睇目前其他聯邦政黨嘅表現啊？咁綠黨又能夠提供啲乜嘢唔同嘅選擇呢？
Well, let me differentiate. I mean, the Green Party is entirely different from every other party in one essential way that I think a lot of voters don't know about, but really like it when they hear about it. And that is that there are Green parties all around the world. By the way, there are 80 Green parties in 80 different countries and over 400 elected Green MPs globally. But we all follow the same core values. And one of them is grassroots democracy, which means, and this is very important in the Canadian context, we don't tell our members of parliament how to vote. We don't punish them if they don't vote the way the leader wants, which is the case for Liberals, Conservatives, New Democrats, Bloc, everybody else. And it's important because we really believe in the connection, the direct connection between the voters and the community.
綠黨嘅政綱提到啊，國民喺住屋上咧花費唔應該超過收入嘅30%㗎。你認為咧，我哋點樣先可以解決到住屋危機，能夠令到一般嘅國民能夠負擔得起住屋啊？
Within the OECD, Canada rates last in terms of public investment in housing, social housing, or sometimes called non-market housing, things like co-ops. They can be built quickly and then they stand the test of time. They can't be flipped, right? So someone can buy a house, and a real estate investor can buy a property with no intention of ever living in it as a home, and then flip it and resell it in the market when there's a hot housing market, flipping and reselling and flipping and reselling. People can't settle into homes, and they get more and more expensive as corporations make money. So we want to take the speculation and the investment out of housing and build houses for people so people can buy a home, stay in their home, and for people who can't afford to buy a home, be able to access a decent roof over their head so that they can live in dignity.
綠黨嘅政綱咧表示我哋需要採取有力嘅氣候行動，並且停止所有新嘅化石燃料開發㗎。你覺得推動呢一項政策面臨最大嘅挑戰係乜嘢？綠黨又計劃點樣能夠同時兼顧環境同埋經濟呢？
Well, the biggest challenge is greed and lies. The science is very clear on this. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is essentially the biggest peer review system in the history of humanity. Scientists debate, study, and come up with a consensus report and then advise governments, this is what you have to do, or human civilization itself is at risk. So we've been working, the community of nations, ever since 1992, when at the Rio Earth Summit, every nation on Earth, including the People's Republic of China, including the United States of America, including Canada, including everyone, signed a commitment to reduce greenhouse gases so that they would not become dangerous in the atmosphere, that global warming would not become dangerous. Now, that was more than 30 years ago. And unfortunately, while some countries have kept their commitments, Canada has the worst record of any of the countries in the G7 because we allowed our emissions to keep going up.
你曾經表示現行嘅稅制存在唔公平嘅現象咁你將會點樣推動稅制改革，以實現更加公平以及包容性嘅稅收制度呢？
The Greens would eliminate anyone paying income tax who earned $40,000 a year or less. So right now you become taxable at $16,000. Under the Green budget, you wouldn't become taxable till $40,000. So the question I'm sure you're asking is, how would you pay for that? Why would you replace the revenue that we get from everyone paying income tax who earns $40,000 a year or less? If we were to have 0.2%, it's so tiny, a 0.2% tax on every financial transaction, changing your from Canadian dollars to US dollars, or changing an investment decision, every transaction with a 0.2% tax, you wouldn't feel it at all. The average Canadian wouldn't notice at all. And even multiple billionaires would hardly notice. But it would generate $54 billion a year to the government of Canada.
綠黨曾經提到要強化加拿大嘅全民醫療保健系統咁你認為目前嘅醫療系統面臨最大嘅挑戰係乜嘢啊？喺你嘅計劃之中，點樣能夠確保所有加拿大人都能夠平等咁獲得所需嘅醫療服務，特別係藥物、牙科同埋心理健康服務方面呢？
The Canada Health Act was passed decades ago, and we have the right to, as Canadians, to have access to high-quality, universal health care, which includes mental health, being in a state of physical well-being. It's not just disease care either. We need to look at preventative health care, make sure we have a healthy population, contributes to a healthy economy. But it is shared jurisdiction. It's not exclusively federal, but sometimes people think it's exclusively provincial, which it isn't. So the federal government transfers dollars from the federal treasury to the provinces. And one problem we've identified is that the provinces are not accountable for how they spend those healthcare transfers. So they can spend them on other things. Some premiers, for example, have used healthcare dollars that should have gone to hiring more doctors to cut taxes so they can win their next election. We want to make sure provinces work together and with the federal government, all of us together, to make sure that we're hiring more doctors, hiring more nurses, eliminating waste in the system, and pharmacare, bringing down the cost of prescription drugs by having one buyer drive down the price through bulk purchasing from pharmaceutical companies, will reduce costs in our healthcare system overall and save us billions of dollars a year. 綠黨提出要以清潔嘅能源為核心嚟到轉型經濟。
咁你認為加拿大喺呢方面同其他國家相比，處於一個乜嘢嘅位置啊？點樣能夠確保喺轉型嘅過程之中，工人同埋社區唔會被落後呢？
Fortunately for Canada, our electricity is already 80% renewable. So if we could integrate, as I said, east and west, north and south, the electricity grids, we can benefit from renewable energy and shut down all the fossil inputs to electricity. That's not that hard to do if we put our minds to it and get the provinces to cooperate with each other and the utilities to cooperate with each other. Meanwhile, for the workers, we're very committed in every community to ensuring that there are opportunities to upskill if needed, get an early pension if you're a worker and you're near retirement age, not have to go back to school to get a new job. Just say, okay, that's fine. Thank you for your work. We've got a lot of opportunity for workers in the fossil fuel sector because they're highly skilled. For instance, all the drillers who drilled the oil wells, 100,000 oil wells now abandoned in Alberta, they all need to be cleaned up. The oil drillers could come back and help us install geothermal at depth in those wells and generate clean electricity. So there are a lot of jobs.
咁綠黨嘅政綱提出咗多項嘅措施去支持唔同年齡階層嘅加拿大人啊！你認為呢一啲嘅改革點樣能夠幫助到解決目前加拿大社會面臨嘅挑戰啊？
Well, we've gone a long way on early childhood education under the previous Liberal government. Agreements have been reached with many provinces. So the real answer is we will continue to follow that lead and make sure that every family in Canada, parents in Canada, have access to affordable early childhood education, quality childcare, and make sure it's available and accessible across Canada. It is, you may even hear my granddaughter in the background sometimes now and then here, but finding childcare for when my daughter's maternity leave ends is really hard. And we recognize that it's a real problem. So the promises from other governments is a start in the right direction. We need to finish the job.
你曾經提議將選舉制度改為比例代表制，咁並且降低投票年齡到16歲。你認為呢一啲嘅改變啊，點樣能夠促進到加拿大選舉嘅公平性同民主參與呢？
The group in Canada that votes the least is the youngest Canadians, between 18 and 25, and they're the ones who live with the decisions we make today much longer than I will. And we find from research that if you don't vote at 18, you're very unlikely to start voting later. So if the voting age starts at 16, when young people are still at home and in their own communities, they're much more likely to vote than if they start voting at 18 when they've gone off to university and aren't as connected. Once you vote your first time, you're much more likely to vote again and again.
上一次嘅聯邦大選呢，綠黨喺全國只係贏得2個議席，咁今次大選即將來臨啦。咁你對於今次嘅選舉目標係乜嘢啊？你哋有冇鎖定邊一啲嘅選區呢？希望能夠有所突破呢？
Paul Manley is running in Nanaimo Ladysmith, where he was the Green MP. He's a fantastic parliamentarian. Same with Mike Morris in Kitchener Centre, Dr. Anne-Marie Zedlik, who's running in Guelph, Jonathan Pedno, my co-leader, who's running in Outremont. So we're a party at the national level with a strong base in many parts of the country. It's British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, Atlantic Canada, where we've had Greens elected in the provincial legislatures in PEI, New Brunswick, Ontario, of course, in British Columbia. We want to achieve enough success that we can be helpful to any government, helpful to Canadians by being in Parliament and working for Canadians, not working to promote our own party.
咁選舉即將嚟到啦，你有冇啲咩信息想帶俾我哋嘅華裔觀眾知道啊？
I'm very grateful that you chose Canada. Immigration is what makes our country healthier, stronger. I know there's a lot of controversy about immigration. I know even some new Canadians think, okay, maybe not so many. We have to plan for immigration. We have to make sure we have the schools, the infrastructure, the communities. But I would just say to the Chinese Canadian community, and I've worked with many of you on many issues, it's really important that Canadians, as we say when we're dealing with Donald Trump, I would say elbows up, but I say elbows up and arms outstretched. We're a country that's benefited from so many newcomers. And we need to hear from you. We need your engagement in our democracy, and we thank you.
Miss May， 再次多謝你接受我哋今次嘅專訪。
Thank you so much, Zoe. I really enjoyed it.
好啦，今集嘅節目時間就差唔多啦。咁如果觀眾對我哋嘅節目有啲乜嘢意見嘅話，係好歡迎大家以電郵嘅方式同我哋聯絡㗎。我哋嘅電郵地址係 mag26@fairchildtv.com。如果觀眾想上網重溫今集嘅節目，亦都可以上到去我哋嘅網站3w.fairchildtv.com， 點擊節目重溫一欄就係睇得返㗎啦。下星期同一時間再同大家見面，晚安。